Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for participating. We are going to do some overview in preparation of the data retreat in January and give you some information about how to prepare for that, what we're going to do there, and so forth. So we'll just go ahead and get started. As Gary said, my name is Ginger Elliott-Teague. I'm Director of Data Analysis, and I'll be running the data retreat with several staff from OSDE. So we look forward to seeing you there. So we hold the data retreat for a couple of reasons. The first and foremost is that one of the needs we have seen across the state, across districts, is that districts don't necessarily, now that we're evaluating results in performance, student performance in particular, along with compliance, a lot of districts aren't sure how to dive into their data to see why their results aren't as high as they would like them to be or think they should be. So we're going to do some training in data analysis. We want you to leave the data retreat with greater capacity for that. We're also going to be talking about how to use data and how to talk about data to guide decision making. So we will be doing a little bit about leadership building also. And one of our goals, really, the foundational goal of this is to enable districts to understand your data, understand what is going on with your students across your district, across your sites, so that you can make improvements. We see it as an empowerment activity, and we love doing it, or at least I love doing it, because we get to work with you and really show you how to compare data across sites, how to dig into comparisons by race and gender and age and grade and all sorts of things. So it's, I personally enjoy it. I don't know if anybody else does, but hopefully you will too. I know some of you have been to the data retreat in the past, and we're changing things up slightly to take that into account and to really focus on building some skills and helping you do that, okay? So in terms of specific topics, we're going to look at and train you in root cause analysis. So we're going to be doing using a technique called the 5 whys process for root cause analysis. And we're going to provide you some basic descriptive and comparative data analysis tools. And we'll be using both Excel and Google Sheets. So if you use Google Sheets, we'll show you how to do a lot of that in there also. And if you don't have either of those, then you can do it on paper, but we do recommend bringing a computer so you can work in spreadsheets themselves. And then we'll be talking about how to build data plans and how to develop a data team in your district so that you can build that capacity long term and with others. You personally are not the only one responsible for good data and quality outcomes for students. This is a district level, district-wide activity, and want to empower all of you to do that. Okay, so what will we do? Here's a brief agenda. It is 2 days. We will start at 8:30 each day. First day we'll finish at 4:30. The second day we'll finish at 3:30, so you can leave to head home. The first day we're going to be doing a little bit of indicator review so that depending on the topic, we'll just briefly cover where that data comes from and where we pull that from and how we calculate results. Then we'll be training in root cause analysis and data analysis. We'll take a break for lunch. And in the afternoon, we'll review and practice the activities we learned in the morning. So we'll be doing some group activities, building pivot tables, looking at comparison tools and so forth. And this is where we'll really get into Excel and Google Sheets. So if you haven't ever done any of that before, we will help you with that, okay? Day 2, so day 1's really sort of a professional development day. Day 2 is where you all will really dig into your own data. So you will have to bring data with you, and we'll show you what that will look like in a little bit. But we want you to pull your data together and begin working on that and really thinking about why your outcomes are the way they are. So we will work with you on that. We'll have several staff there in the morning to help look at your data, help you work in Excel or Google Sheets, and begin that root cause analysis. Okay, and we'll continue that into the afternoon for a little bit. Then we'll cover a tool called the Data Meeting Protocol, which is intended to help you lead data-related meetings in your district and to pull together a team for that. And then you'll have a little bit of time at the end to plan how you're going to move forward and what you're going to do next, since the data retreat is just one required step within the level 3 support monitoring process. Okay. And then we'll finish. You will get a certificate for participation so that acknowledging your PD hours that you spend at the retreat. Okay. We will start registration at 8 a.m. and so you can get there about that time. I'll give you the dates and locations in a little bit. So what can you expect? Be prepared to work in teams. You'll be working with your district folks and others. So we'll have you in groups, district groups at tables. You will spend a lot of time with spreadsheets. And in advance of that, in advance of the retreat, we recommend that you enhance your skills in Excel or Google Sheets. We have some recommended videos for you all to do various things and build your skills in that area. I'll be sending those out by email after this presentation. I was going to put them in the presentation itself, but ran out of time this morning to do that. So we will give you that in email. It'll be easier for you to access the links that way anyway. You will have time to dedicate to understanding your district's data, so prepared to come with data so that you can spend your time meaningfully with support looking at your data. And then be prepared to begin planning how to talk about data with others. So some data visualization and some other things like that. And some planning, certainly. You know, we don't want this just to be a one-time activity, but want you to learn how to use what you learn to share with others and how to look at data across your district outside of special ed and elsewhere. Okay. So do you have to attend? We get this question every year. Yes, level 3 support districts are required to attend. Not attending will result in additional non-compliance points on next year's determination. Okay, so you do need to attend. 2 individuals from each district are required, 1 special ed and 1 in general ed, preferably in the administration, to help support the data analysis and decision making. It will count toward the district's professional development bonus on the determination next year, and you will receive a certificate of attendance for 11.5 hours of professional development. Okay. So what should you bring? Dress casually. It is going to be, you know, we'll be sitting at tables, working with each other. You don't need suits. You don't need, you know, high heels, anything like that. Dress comfortably for the work, and bring a computer, note paper, writing implements, calculator, etc. Snacks and a water bottle. There are vending machines at the location and lunch places nearby. So you can bring a lunch if you'd like, but there are a lot of restaurants nearby. It'll be in Midwest City, so lots of places to eat. And certainly, of course, bring your data. Bring spreadsheets with enough information in them to help you begin to analyze across groups and such to help you with that root cause analysis. Okay. So the first, we do have 2 data retreats this year because we have so many districts. In the past, we've invited level 2 support districts to attend. We are not doing that this year. So we've broken it into 2 data retreats, and only level 3 can attend. So the first retreat is going to focus on assessment data, compliance, and finance. We only have 1 district level 3 for finance, so they'll be working with our finance folks. But the compliance and assessment, we have some districts that overlap in those areas, so we thought it'd be best to do that, and a lot of districts focusing on assessment. So the first retreat will be looking at assessment. If you're bringing assessment data, you need to bring demographic, academic, and attendance data for 3rd to 11th graders. Okay, ideally multiple years if you have it. So, you know, there are attendance data for the last few years, their discipline data for the last few years, assessment scores for the last few years. We know that this is a big data haul. So if you have access to it and can look at it that way, but we do recommend that if you can, you put that all into one spreadsheet to begin with, because it will make reviewing it much easier if it's all in one place. But demographic data could include race, gender, age, grade, certainly, you know, attendance data, discipline, certainly school site, assessment scores you need, so forth. Include your IEP details. So if your students with IEPs, their accommodations information, their disability, their LRE, those sorts of things. Most recent eligibility information. Ideally, bring data for both general ed and special ed students, because one thing that you will be wanting to know is why are special ed students not comparing at the same or not performing at the same rates as general ed students, and there may be some patterns there that we can discern in your data. Include, and this is not necessarily student level, but it could be school system data. So do you have tutoring programs? Do you have counseling opportunities for students, especially little kids? Do you have specialized instruction? Do you have an MTSS program? These kinds of things. And how are special ed students participating in them? So what's going on in your district at the system level that could be affecting performance? Bring those kinds of information also. So here's an example data set. This is very brief. We would expect a lot more data elements than this, but this may give you a sense of that. So each row here represents one student. I just randomly made up this data with ID numbers instead of names. So student number 109, grade 4. Yes, the student has accommodations. They were absent for 6 days last year. Their primary disability is SLD. Their school site, they're at the elementary school number 1, you know, presuming they have 2 or 3. They are Black, a girl, age 10. They are in the general ed classroom 95% of the time, and their math score was proficient. So this is the style of spreadsheet that would be really beneficial to build for your district. Each row would be one student, and you fill in the column of data to the right. So for each of your students, you just start filling that in. Grade 7, no accommodations, 15 days absent, etc. Now, if you have questions about how to build these, we will be happy to talk with you about that. But these are just some basic data elements you want to consider. What else do you need to know in your district to explain why progress has not been made? Why are you not meeting the target for the baseline target of 15% proficiency for a district? Okay, so you need to think about what other factors might affect that. The second data retreat will focus on secondary data and early childhood outcomes. So if you're coming because you have been flagged for secondary data, you need to bring demographic, academic, and attendance data for your high school students, okay? So this is going to be 14 to 21 for dropout, 16 to 21 for graduation. Bring your race, gender, age, GPA, course passing details, attendance, discipline, school site, all of that kind of stuff may affect why students are dropping out or not graduating on time. Include your IEP details for those kiddos with IEPs. Again, bring both general ed and special ed data if you can, because you may want to compare across those two groups. And certainly school system data. So, do you have good counseling services? Do you have transition programs? Do you have dropout prevention programs? Do you have an alternate school to assist students who are not successful in the traditional educational environment, and so forth? And then if you do have those, how many of your kiddos are participating in those programs? Do you see that the children who are dropping out are participating or not? That could be something to focus on. So thinking about that. Certainly, you may want to bring, if you don't have, if you don't want to download it ahead of time, though we do recommend you do that, you may want to bring a login access to single sign-on so you can access your accountability data, your comprehensive exit report, and so forth, depending on what you need to look at. So here's an example data set for secondary, and this is specific to dropouts. So again, an ID number, the exit date, you would want to know the exit date. Maybe there's a trend of dropouts in December, for example, before winter break and as the first semester ends. So what we will be doing is looking for trends and trying to figure out why those trends exist. Absenteeism, disability, school site, race, gender, age, the days suspended, okay, and then GPA. Think about what other factors you might want to consider for that, and what's specific to graduation. Okay, so for dropouts, are they successful in 8th grade? Do you have a lot of dropouts in 9th grade of students who were low performing in 8th grade? You may need a transition program between 8th and 9th grade, for example. Or if you see a lot of kiddos dropping out in 11th grade, what's going on with that? Is it a particular site, or is it a particular set of teachers, a particular race or gender? So really thinking through, why is this happening? Who is it happening to? Because it's not everyone in your district. So we need to know why those specific kiddos are having trouble to the extent that they feel they need to drop out. So a question, are we only required to bring data for indicators that we were non-compliant? We'll talk about compliance in a bit, but most of these indicators are performance indicators. So it's because you did not meet the target for those performance indicators. And I believe we've told you which category you need to focus on. It'll be the same category that you need to do the self-assessment and improvement plan in grants management system. So you should know already whether you need to focus on assessment, secondary, and or ECOs. If you've been flagged for 2 or 3 of those categories, you can bring data for both or all, or you can just bring data for one because you'll learn how to use those processes. There probably won't be time to dig into multiple areas, but you can, so you can just bring one if you've been flagged for more than one area. Okay, and then if you're bringing ECO data, you want to bring demographic and academic data for your 3 to 6-year-olds in special ed. You don't need general education data for these kiddos because we don't collect ECO information for them. So gender, school site, lead teacher, birth date, certainly the ECO ratings, disability, etc. And because a lot of ECO data is affected by what adults know around those children, definitely bring some staffing information too. So if you've had a lot of turnover for your early childhood folks or your SLPs, how long have they been in office? When were those turnover periods? Have you had gaps in service provision? What is their experience with rating early childhood outcomes? Have they gone through the modules? What are your written procedures? Are they present and are they being followed? So thinking broadly about those system characteristics, particularly related to staff. So an example data set for ECOs, again, student level, each row should represent a student. In this case, student number 101, they entered the early childhood program on 10/5/17. They exited about 1.5 years later. Primary disability was speech at the elementary 1 site. Race was white, gender female. They aged out at 6 from the EC, the early childhood program. Their teacher of record was June. Okay, again, I'm just making all of this up. From entry to exit for outcome A, their scores were 3 and 4. Okay, so this kind of information you might be able to look across. And once we do pivot tables, you may be able to look and say, oh, wow, all of Mark's kiddos are problematic. I wonder if he's trained well. Or everyone at elementary school site 2 is missing data. I wonder why that is. Or everyone with a particular disability is showing no progress in a particular outcome. Okay, so we're going to be digging in, looking at what those trends and patterns are. So you need to know how to explain why data is missing, why progress is not being made, okay? You may also want to know whether the child is in a regular ed program. Certainly for the 3 to 6-year-olds, they may not be required to come to your, and you may not have a public preschool program. So it could be that they're not making progress because they're not in a regular ed program. That is certainly something that's important to know. Maybe the primary staff person was out during a certain time and missed entering data, okay? So all of those kinds of things are things to think about. Now, if you're bringing compliance data, and again, this would be for the first data retreat, you need to bring data relevant to your district's areas of non-compliance. So let's just presume one area at a time. But you need to bring your demographic data for students with IEPs. You don't need gen ed data when you're talking about compliance because we're looking solely within the special ed population. So again, those basic demographic information, staffing information, teachers of record, all of that is really important because, again, compliance is dependent on adults, not the students. So there may be patterns across students that we're looking at, but really we're going to be seeing if adults are treating children differently or if there are site differences, those kinds of things. So you need to bring information about dates of absence, experience with transition, either early childhood or secondary, whether you have written procedures available and are they being followed, information about the school calendar, and so forth. Certainly, depending on the category or the compliance indicator, you'll want to bring your dates of consent and eligibility, IEP finalization, disability information, transition dates, goals, all of that kind of stuff. Okay. So, for example, data set for 45-day timeline compliance. You would want to bring your date of consent information, date of eligibility, disability, both primary and secondary if you have it. Perhaps students who have been given us categories with a secondary disability have longer eligibility times. Okay, that would be something that you might want to look into. Race, gender, age. Age could be a factor. Little kiddos may get through quickly, older kiddos may not. Teachers of record and the evaluators, very important information there too. So when you're thinking about your timeline compliance, think about everything that you may need to know to understand why compliance is not being met. For early childhood transition, you would want to bring your referral date information, dates of transition planning conference meetings, your staffing dates, school calendars, and so forth. It may be that you only are untimely right around Christmas break, and any kiddos who have birthdays in December and January get shuffled to February because of timing. Well, that's a problem. What kinds of procedures and policies can you put in place to avoid that from happening? Okay, but until you look at your data, you won't see those patterns and be able to improve. For secondary transition, bringing information about school site, grade, certainly discipline, attendance, who's the counselor, what courses are the students taking, when is their birthday, their IEP date. If you have an IEP date in May, it may be that the end of the year is just so tight that you don't get around to finalizing those on time. So what can you do about that? Okay. And again, on any of these, we're happy to help you build a data set, think about which factors to include, where to find that data, and so forth. Okay, so again, how should you prepare for the data retreat? You plan your travel, ensure funding is budgeted. I'm going to talk about funding in a little bit and what funding opportunities you can use, so hold on there. Pull together as much data as possible, and then raise your skill level in Excel or Google Sheets. Okay, we will send out the links in the follow-up email. So a couple of things, when and where. The assessment, compliance, and finance topics will be discussed on January 13th and 14th. You've already been told those dates, and then the secondary and ECOs are going to be January 21st and 22nd. And it's all day both days, so be prepared to be there for 2 full days, okay? It will be at the Rose State College Professional Training Center. The address is 1720 Hudeberg Drive in Midwest City. It's quite easy to get to. You take that Hudaberg Drive exit, you head on into Rose State, go north a little bit. There's a ton of construction around there right now, so watch out for that. But if you go to the north side of that building, that number 24 on the map, there you can enter the parking lot. You can't enter it from the south side, even though the map shows that you can, but it's not open right now because of construction. So go to the north side of that building and you can park. It's free parking for everyone, okay? So options for funding, there are 3 options. You can self-fund, you can use Project 613 or Project 615. If you are not going to submit for reimbursement, you do not need to submit any documentation, okay? This is certainly appropriate if you're nearby or you want to commute. You could still file for reimbursement for mileage if you plan ahead, depending on how far away you are. I think you have to be at least 65 miles away in order to file for reimbursement, get the hotel and so forth. Okay. Now for 613 and 615, you have to do a little bit more planning work because you have to pre-budget. If you're going to use Project 613 funding, the data retreat is a pre-approved PD event, so you can submit for that. And the 613 funding will reimburse costs of mileage, substitutes, hotels, if your district is more than 65 miles away from the training site. 613 funding will not cover per diem, okay? You do have to submit a budget application in GMS. You have to name the attendees, event details, estimated costs, and so forth. So you do have to enter all of that information ahead of time. And then once the event has been held, you just submit your receipts for reimbursement. We recommend that you do that early because the project funds are limited. And if the project funds reach their max, then there won't be any left. So it's based on availability. The other option is using Project 615 funding. This is only available for districts that have already submitted a budget application in GMS. This was due December 1st. Okay, so if you did not do that, 615 funding is not available for this project. But if you did do that, and you did not include the data retreat in that budget application, you will need to revise that budget to include the data retreat description with an estimated cost, but you are certainly welcome to do that. And this is available to be used by districts for anything that enhances teachers' impact, and it will cover per diem also, okay? So if you want to, if you have budgeted for 615 already and you want to revise to include the data retreat, then all of your expenses will be covered. But again, I don't know if it needs to be 65 miles or more or not. That's a Felisa question. But again, you would submit your receipts for reimbursement to that area. Okay, so I'm going to pause for a second before we get into the last couple things. Any questions so far about finance, about the data to bring, about time and location, or anything like that? I'm just going to watch the chat box for a little bit. Okay, I don't see any questions. That means you'll be calling us later, and that's all right. We do need each of you who will be attending to respond to a pre-training survey. This will help us know how much we need to focus on Google Sheets versus Excel, whether what kinds of skills you have in those areas, because we'll want to do a little bit of training there, whether you know much about root cause analysis and so forth. So if you can answer the survey, you can either take your phone and image it. Don't take a picture, but you can use your camera to image on that QR code and it will open up the link for you, or you can type in this link. We will be sending out the slides with the email, with the links to training for Excel and Google Sheets, and this link will be in there. So if you just want to wait until we send out the slides to you so you can access that link, you can do that also. But if you can do that within the next couple of weeks, that would be really helpful so we can plan well for the retreat. So a couple of questions. I'm planning on attending with the elementary principal. If your area of need is early childhood outcomes, then yes, the elementary principal is certainly appropriate. If your area of need is secondary outcomes, then elementary principal may not be the best person to attend. So it depends on what your area of need is. 7 and 11. So 7 is early childhood outcomes. So yes, you would want to bring academic information for your little kiddos. For 11, if you're not doing compliance for the retreat, then you don't need to worry about 11. You would only worry about early childhood outcomes. So give us a call and double check which area you should focus on for the retreat. So if you have questions about data, about the spreadsheets, about how to collect it, where it's located, give us a call. I'm happy to answer. Tristan or Travis will help also. If you have questions about compliance or the monitoring process, what your area topic is, please call Felisa or Cheryl. Tina is out for about a month, so I would recommend not trying to give her a call. If you have funding questions, particularly 613 funding, Felisa can help you with that, or your finance specialist certainly would be able to assist you also. Okay, if there are no other questions, we look forward to seeing you in January. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and give us a call if you need anything. Thanks.